Welcome to the Sinister Empires. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Let's uncover history the world tried to forget. The year was 838 CE, in the jagged mountains of northern Syria. Dawn broke over the Holy Cross Convent, a sanctuary perched on a wind-battered hill. 23 women knelt in prayer, their lips moving in unison. The words were old, sacred. The Our Father in Syriac, repeated every morning for decades. But today the prayer tasted different. It carried the weight of goodbye. Outside, the horizon shimmered, not just from the rising sun, but from the banners of an unstoppable empire. The Abbasid army moved, not like a single force, but as a river of steel and devotion, swallowing valleys and villages. Black banners snapped in the wind, each inscribed with the words, "There is no God but God." Mother Sophia, the abbess, clutched the wooden cross that had been in her family for generations. Her hands shook, but not from fear. She knew what was coming. The sisters knew too. They had heard the stories from other convents. Some women survived only after renouncing their faith. Others vanished without a trace. But this convent was isolated. Pine trees twisted in the mountain wind, eagles nested in the rocky outcroppings, and below, olive groves stretched across the valley. The nearest Byzantine garrison was a week's ride away. Here, the nuns were alone, the perfect symbols of resistance to an empire that aimed not to kill, but to erase. The convent was more than a spiritual retreat. It was a haven of knowledge. Inside its stone walls, manuscripts were copied and preserved, herbs were cultivated for healing, and the sick from nearby villages were tended with care. Mother Sophia herself had studied medicine, Greek and Syriac before taking her vows. Sister Helena, 70, had endured 46 years in monastic life, witnessing invasions, deaths of abbesses, and the rise of empires. Sister Miriam, barely 19, had fled a bandit raid 2 years prior. The convent had been her sanctuary since. The other 20 sisters varied in age, education, and origin, but all shared the same devotion and courage. Then the news arrived. A local farmer stumbled to the convent gates, shouting warnings, riders in the valley, black banners more than he could count. The sisters gathered in the chapel, kneeling in silent recognition. They did not need explanations. They understood the meaning. Some would be offered the mercy of conversion. Others would be absorbed, enslaved, or taken to Baghdad. Their choices, their bodies, their identities would be put on the auction block of an empire. The gates splintered open at dawn. Soldiers dismounted, 36 men in all, their curved swords sheathed. 2 men followed, one a scholar administrator, the other a commanding officer, used to obedience. Their presence signaled efficiency rather than cruelty. Khaled ibn Suleiman, the governor's representative, surveyed the convent with the calm precision of a merchant inspecting inventory. The sisters were gathered in the courtyard. Khaled read aloud a scroll in Greek, offering protection, mercy, and a new life to those who would embrace Islam. Those who refused were told of the Caliph's judgment. Mother Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady. "We have already given our lives to another king. We cannot serve 2 masters. We will remain as we are." Khaled's face betrayed no surprise. He expected their defiance. 3 days' food and water will be provided. At the end, reconsider. Otherwise, you will be taken to Baghdad. The soldiers moved them back inside the chapel, barring the doors from outside. Stone became their prison. Hunger, fear, and silence filled the hours. Yet the sisters endured, turning fasting into prayer, pain into discipline. Sister Miriam trembled when offered bread. But Mother Sophia's gentle grip reminded her resistance was their devotion. By the 3rd day, exhaustion had set in. Sister Thakla, 64, collapsed. The younger sisters carried her until she could no longer rise. They buried her by the roadside, silent witnesses to the empire's methodical efficiency. Each life lost was recorded in Khaled's ledger with meticulous precision. Sister Anastasia, stubborn and silent, refused to continue, leaving the column momentarily diminished, a testament to the physical and spiritual toll of the march. The sisters' spirits, however, remained unbroken. They walked in silence, not of defeat, but of absolute resolve. Mother Sophia led, bound and hollow, yet unwavering. Her soul refused capture even when her body was seized. The younger sisters wept. The older ones prayed harder. By the 7th day, Khaled summoned Mother Sophia alone. Historical records are silent on what happened next, but a letter discovered in 1987 in St. Catherine's Monastery archives tells the story. She was dressed in fine clothing and paraded as a convert, yet her lips moved in silent Syriac prayer. Her body had been conquered. Her soul remained untouched. This was the Abbasid strategy. Living proof that rebellion was futile, leaving behind ghosts who had been physically integrated but spiritually unconquered. The journey continued to Raqqa on the 8th day. The Euphrates stretched wide, carrying trade and life from multiple continents. The nuns were herded onto river galleys, chained to benches. Here the empire's bureaucracy and precision were most evident. They were not passengers. They were human cargo, carefully categorized and accounted for. 21 women remained. Each movement, each ration, each chain recorded with administrative detachment. The voyage was brutal. Summer heat turned the hold into an oven, nights were bitterly cold, and water was rationed with precision to prevent waste. Yet even in these conditions, the sisters' faith endured. Sister Miriam, unused to rivers so wide, clutched her knees and whispered prayers. Sister Helena remained a model of endurance. Mother Sophia's silent leadership guided them as their bodies ached and spirits strained against the imposed order. They were walking monuments to defiance, not through battle but through persistence, patience, and prayer. The Abbasid machine was efficient, brutal, and unfeeling. But it had miscalculated. It could capture bodies, chains, and names, but it could not touch what the sisters carried inside. By the time the river galleys docked at Raqqa, the sisters were shadows of their former selves. Their limbs were stiff from chains, faces gaunt from hunger, and minds heavy with the relentless march of days. The city was a sprawling hub of trade, learning, and imperial power, a place where silk and spices passed through bustling markets, and scholars debated under the shade of palm trees. Yet for the captured nuns, the city offered no wonder, only confinement. They were escorted to a fortified compound outside the city, a large building that had once served as a merchant's warehouse. The walls were thick, windows narrow, and guards constant. Inside, the air smelled of sweat, iron, and incense. Here, the Abbasid administration continued its precise cataloguing. Each woman was examined, questioned, and assigned a status. Some could be converted and integrated into households, some sent to remote estates. And the defiant ones would face imprisonment in Baghdad. Mother Sophia, despite her exhaustion, assessed the situation with sharp clarity. She realized that resistance now required patience, cunning, and unity. The sisters gathered in small groups, whispering prayers, reading from scraps of texts they had managed to keep hidden, and comforting one another. Sister Miriam, the youngest, still clutched the worn edges of her prayer book, finding solace in letters and words that spoke of endurance. The Abbasid officials, methodical as always, made a public demonstration. 5 women, chosen at random, were brought before the compound gates, offered freedom in exchange for conversion, and threatened with removal to Baghdad if they refused. The others were made to watch. 3 accepted, hunger, fear, and the desire for survival driving them to compromise their beliefs. 2 refused, their heads held high, eyes locked onto the horizon, refusing to acknowledge that the empire could touch their spirits. Mother Sophia knew that these displays were calculated to break morale. She gathered the remaining sisters that night and spoke softly. They can take our bodies, they can chain us, starve us, and move us across the empire. But our faith, our knowledge, our devotion, that is beyond their reach. Hold it, and we are free in ways they will never understand. The days stretched into weeks. The sisters were assigned menial tasks, cleaning, cooking, and mending the compound's furnishings. They were under constant watch, but the Abbasid officials underestimated their resourcefulness. Sister Helena secretly taught younger nuns to read and write in Syriac and Greek, hiding scraps of parchment behind stones in the walls. Sister Miriam learned the names of herbs and how to identify edible plants from the city markets. Even under surveillance, they found ways to preserve their knowledge, their culture, and their identity. One night, a commotion outside shook the compound. A group of merchants had arrived, and with them an influential Abbasid judge. He demanded a list of all captives and their assigned fates. Khaled ibn Suleiman was there to answer, efficient and calm. But an argument arose, subtle, bureaucratic, and almost invisible to the guards. Mother Sophia, listening from a corner, realized that the empire was not monolithic. Disputes and rivalries existed even within its powerful structure. Small cracks in the machinery of control could be exploited. On the 10th night, an opportunity presented itself. A sudden storm rolled over Raqqa, wind lashing the compound walls, rain flooding the courtyard. The guards were distracted, the city's chaotic energy amplified by lightning and thunder. Mother Sophia seized the moment. Whispering instructions to the sisters, they enacted a simple, daring plan. Hiding in the shadows, moving silently between walls, they retrieved the hidden parchments, gathered provisions, and prepared to signal the city's outskirts. It was not a full escape. That would have been impossible. But it was a statement. They would not become passive captives. Sister Miriam, trembling yet determined, tied pieces of cloth to branches outside the compound as signals. Sister Helena whispered prayers to guide their courage. And Mother Sophia, the unbroken leader, ensured that every move was precise. The next morning, the Abbasid officials discovered the parchments. Furious, they interrogated the sisters. Mother Sophia, standing calm and dignified, admitted only that they had preserved their own faith and knowledge. An act the officials could neither punish nor entirely comprehend. The sisters' defiance was subtle, quiet, and invisible in the eyes of the empire. Yet it was revolutionary in its implications. The Abbasids could control bodies, but they could not imprison hearts and minds. Word of the obedient but defiant convent reached Baghdad. High-ranking officials debated what to do with them. Some argued that the women should be sent to the capital to serve as examples of imperial mercy. Others insisted that those who refused conversion must be punished publicly. Mother Sophia had anticipated this. She encouraged the sisters to remain calm, patient, and unified. They had survived the march and the river. They could survive the politics of empire. In the compound, life continued. Daily routines were maintained, yet, under the veneer of compliance, the sisters built a network of observation, memorization, and subtle communication. Every interaction with guards, merchants, and officials was studied. Every rule, every expectation was a lesson in survival. Even in captivity, they discovered that knowledge was power, patience was resistance, and solidarity was salvation. Weeks passed. Some women were quietly moved to different estates, integrated into households as servants. Others were relocated to Baghdad. Mother Sophia and her closest companions remained in Raqqa, the last line of defiance for the convent. And in this forced stillness, the nuns began to write a secret chronicle, a record of what had happened, a testament to endurance, a story for generations to come. The empire had brought them here to assert control. The sisters had arrived broken, hungry, and fearful. And yet even within the confines of walls, chains, and empire, they were unbroken in spirit. Their story was not just survival. It was resistance, subtle, enduring, and immortal. The journey to Baghdad began at dawn, with the sisters chained together on a convoy of carts and river galleys. The landscape had changed from the narrow valleys of northern Syria to the wide, flat plains that led toward the heart of the Abbasid Empire. The sun was relentless, the dust choking, and the chains biting into wrists and ankles. The soldiers gave no words of comfort, only orders, and the occasional harsh slap for those who faltered. Mother Sophia walked at the front, her head held high, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sister Miriam struggled beside her, every step a test of endurance. The older sisters moved with a quiet, steady determination, their long experience in prayer and fasting giving them a resilience that defied the ordinary human body. And yet fatigue was a constant companion. Muscles ached, blisters formed, and thirst gnawed at the edges of consciousness. The cities and villages along the route were a blur, markets filled with exotic goods, mosques rising above bustling streets, and townspeople staring at the procession of captives with curiosity, fear, or indifference. Each day was measured, not in hours, but in steps taken, in endurance maintained. The sisters spoke in whispers in Greek and Syriac, reminding one another of prayers, hymns, and their shared faith. At night, the guards would sleep lightly, unaware that the sisters had begun to pass information between themselves in coded messages. Every whispered prayer, every movement of a hand or piece of clothing conveyed strategy and encouragement. They were not merely surviving, they were learning how to be invisible in plain sight, how to endure without surrendering. By the fourth day, the convoy had reached the Euphrates River, where the sisters were transferred to a large river galley. The hold was cramped, dark and suffocating, with iron rings bolted into the wooden benches. The sun made the deck unbearable, and the heat inside the hold turned it into an oven. Water and barley gruel were rationed once per day, just enough to keep the women functional, never enough to nourish fully. The journey was not just physical. It was psychological, designed to break them through monotony, deprivation, and constant surveillance. The Abbasids had learned that fatigue eroded resistance faster than any blade. Yet the sisters adapted. Mother Sophia instituted silent meditations, prayers, and rituals that reminded them of their identity and faith. Sister Helena taught younger nuns to keep count of days and to recite complex psalms backward to maintain mental clarity. Sister Miriam discovered small ways to help others, passing scraps of bread discreetly to those weaker, creating small moments of solidarity. One night, a sudden storm struck the river. Lightning split the sky, rain lashed the deck, and waves threatened to overturn the galley. The guards panicked, scrambling to secure cargo and keep the vessel upright. The sisters, though terrified, found a strange calm in the chaos. Mother Sophia held a small cross in her hand, whispering prayers, and one by one, the sisters joined her in silent devotion. The storm became a crucible, both terrifying and purifying. By the morning, the sisters emerged soaked, shivering but unbroken in spirit. During the voyage, the Abbasid officials occasionally boarded the galley, inspecting the captives. Khaled ibn Suleiman visited, notebook in hand, taking notes on the progress of the women. Some officials tried persuasion, offering food and small comforts in exchange for submission and conversion. The sisters refused. Even the youngest, Sister Miriam, had learned that yielding even momentarily could unravel the spirit entirely. As they neared Baghdad, the city's enormity became apparent. The walls rose like mountains, towers glittering in the sunlight, gates guarded by soldiers in ornate armor. The Tigris River flowed like a silver artery through the heart of the empire, carrying ships laden with goods, people, and power. From the riverbanks, one could see scholars walking with scrolls, merchants bargaining with a mix of Arabic, Persian, and Greek, and the distant spires of mosques rising above the city like testimony to the empire's might. The sisters were unloaded at the docks and marched through the city under guard. The streets were alive with merchants, beggars, soldiers, and officials, a cacophony of noise and movement. Yet amidst the crowd, the sisters remained invisible in their determination. Heads bowed, lips moving silently in prayer, feet bleeding from the long march. The people of Baghdad stared, some with curiosity, some with disinterest, but none fully grasped the significance of what passed before them. They were taken to a compound near the heart of the city, a vast building of stone and marble, fortified and controlled. Here, the Abbasids had stationed administrators, scholars, and guards to manage the influx of captives from across the empire. Each woman was examined again, her strength, knowledge, and resistance catalogued. Some were assigned to households as domestic workers. Others were slated for service in palaces or as concubines. Mother Sophia and her closest companions were kept together, recognized as leaders of the group. It was here that the sisters faced their most profound test. The officials offered food, clothing, and shelter in exchange for conversion. They presented arguments, quoting scripture, explaining mercy, and demonstrating the empire's supposed benevolence. "Speak the words," they said. "There is no God but God, Muhammad is his messenger." 6 words. That is all it takes to live. Mother Sophia's response was steady. "We have already given our lives to another king. We will not serve 2 masters. We are what we are, and nothing you offer will change that." The officials were not angry. Anger was inefficient. They noted her response, catalogued it, and adjusted her fate. This too was part of the Abbasid system. Meticulous, bureaucratic, and chillingly impersonal. The sisters were now fully within the machinery of empire, but their spirits remained intact. Even within the compound, the sisters found ways to resist. They maintained secret studies, whispered prayers, and small acts of defiance. Every interaction with guards or officials was observed, noted, and used to preserve knowledge. They hid manuscripts, passed coded messages, and remembered every detail of the empire's operation, learning not just to survive, but to endure with dignity. The empire had conquered their bodies, moved them through cities and rivers, subjected them to hunger and exhaustion. But it had not conquered their minds. Mother Sophia and the sisters understood that survival was more than endurance. It was memory, identity, and faith. And within the heart of Baghdad, amidst the power and luxury of the Abbasid Caliphate, these women became living symbols of resistance, invisible yet potent, passive yet defiant. The sisters had been in Baghdad for weeks now. The initial shock of the city's enormity, the precision of its bureaucracy, and the constant observation of their captors had given way to a rhythm, a tense, measured routine in which survival and resistance intertwined. Every day was a test, every meal and gesture a subtle negotiation with their captors. Mother Sophia had grown wise in the ways of concealment. She could read the mood of the officials, anticipate the questions of scholars, and guide her sisters in maintaining appearances while protecting their faith and identity. Sister Miriam, once the most timid, had become adept at small acts of rebellion, hiding scraps of food, memorizing the names of guards, and noting the comings and goings of officials. Sister Helena maintained a quiet record of events, teaching the younger nuns how to read, write, and pray without detection. Together they were no longer merely survivors. They were observers, chroniclers, and silent resistors. One morning the caliph's chief administrator, a man known for his ruthlessness and intellect, summoned Mother Sophia. She entered a grand hall lined with marble columns and intricate mosaics, the air heavy with incense. The man's gaze was sharp, calculating as if he could read her very thoughts. "You have been here long enough," he said. "Your resistance is noted. It is unusual." His words were careful, measured. "You have strength, courage, and stubbornness. Such qualities can serve a higher purpose. There is a way for you to thrive here, if you are willing to speak, to guide, and to teach." Mother Sophia's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "We survive by keeping our faith. That cannot change, no matter what opportunity you offer." The administrator studied her silently, then nodded. "Very well. But know this, the world does not reward weakness. Survival often requires compromise. You may resist, but the empire is patient." The sisters returned to their quarters, aware that the struggle was far from over. They understood that their captors were testing not only their resolve, but their capacity to endure the unendurable. Every interaction, every offer of food or comfort was a trap, a measure of whether they would bend or remain unbroken. As weeks passed, the sisters adapted further. They found ways to move secretly, to communicate with other captives, to share knowledge and support. They discovered that the empire's vastness was both a threat and a shield. Its bureaucratic machine could not attend to every detail simultaneously, leaving cracks in which subtle defiance could flourish. One evening, Mother Sophia gathered the sisters. The room was dim, the light of oil lamps flickering against the walls. "We have endured much," she said. "But endurance is not enough. We must be proactive. Our survival is not simply to live, it is to preserve what is sacred, to resist invisibly, and to leave behind a record of who we are and what we believe." The sisters nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. They began to plan small acts of resistance that would not draw the attention of guards, but would strengthen their spirits and preserve knowledge. They memorized texts, whispered prayers in hidden corners, and even devised a coded system of communication with women in other quarters. The Abbasid Empire might control their bodies, but their minds remained free. Months passed. The sisters' reputation grew among the captives. Whispers of their courage, wisdom, and quiet defiance spread. Officials began to notice, some impressed, others wary. The sisters realized that they were no longer simply prisoners. They were symbols, living reminders that the human spirit could endure even the most meticulous oppression. Then came a turning point. A new official, young and ambitious, sought to test the sisters' limits. He offered them privileges, better quarters, food, clothing, and the chance to live comfortably, but only if they would renounce their faith. The sisters considered carefully. They knew that refusal would bring harsher treatment, yet acceptance would betray everything they had endured and preserved. Mother Sophia addressed the group. "We are at the edge of our faith, the edge of our endurance. Our choice is clear. We may gain comfort, or we may keep our integrity. The empire may control our bodies, but it cannot claim our souls. Let us choose wisely." With unity they refused. The official was furious, but he was bound by the empire's rules. He could punish, isolate, or threaten, but he could not erase the quiet power they wielded through faith, intelligence, and solidarity. The sisters' refusal became legendary among the captives, a testament to endurance, courage, and moral clarity. In the months that followed, the sisters found a strange rhythm: endurance, observation, and subtle influence. They taught others in secret, shared food when possible, and preserved knowledge that the empire had sought to suppress. They had learned that survival was not merely physical. It was spiritual, intellectual, and moral. They had become living symbols of resistance, teaching those around them that oppression could not extinguish the human spirit. Eventually, an opportunity arose to return home through negotiation, ransom, or escape. But even as they approached freedom, the sisters understood that the lessons of captivity would remain with them forever. The empire's grandeur, its cruelty, and its bureaucracy had been formidable. But it had failed to destroy what was most important: faith, courage, and unity. Mother Sophia looked at her sisters as they stepped into the sunlight outside Baghdad. Their chains were removed, but the scars, physical and emotional, would remain. Yet their spirits were unbroken. They had endured famine, exhaustion, and relentless observation. They had resisted conversion, survived threats, and preserved their identity. The journey back would be long and perilous, but they would walk it together, strengthened by what they had endured. Baghdad had tested them, but it had not conquered them. And in every whisper of prayer, every secret act of defiance, and every memory preserved, the sisters had ensured that the story of their survival would be told. A story of courage in the face of empire, of faith unshaken, and of the human spirit's capacity to endure.